we're about to watch Allone. How would you like to introduce that?
The filmmaker, David Lynch, is very against philosophizing about his work. And the idea is that it reduces the film in some way. In some way, I agree with him that there's something going on in a film that's beyond logical register and reasoning. But I actually think that there's so much going on that philosophizing about it and talking about it will never capture it. But instead of this being a reason to not talk, I think this is an introduction to talk.
Yeah.
So one makes a film with one's own set of ideas. Something comes out often in what you're doing that tells you about yourself in a way that you didn't realize, and it's surprising to you. And I think I was surprised about some of the elements of the film, not least on a practical level, because there's weather in the way, there's money issues in the way, there's time. It always looks, and you're working with so many different people, it always looks different to how you intended. So it's always beyond you. But I think this is a story, it's a very ancient story. This is one that we didn't write. This is one that really inspired us to make something. It's an ancient Buddhist parable. But I hope that even though it's about a woman, even though it's set in a particular time and place in Ireland, even though it's about a particular form of suffering, I hope that whoever watches it can take something from it and can experience a sense of convening with the characters in the film and the other people who might watch the film and get something out of it.
Yeah, the themes for everything we've done with this Church of the Contradiction are nothing lives, nothing saves, and nothing binds. And I think this short film, in a way, is a beautiful cinematic exploration of those three themes. So, thank you.
Epilogue na Allone, a griffór na siog, a inné na húd é danan, ach madí in tinne sirí, inis coig líon bríd an tinne, lasrach a tinne sa teilech, ag tuairt an tolas an Sahari Barísh. Is gear ag an íomhre, ach leanan an datha go sirí. Glannan an datha go sirí, gin an bríd álaigí, gin an bríd álaigí, gin an bríd
álaigí. Fuig an ágan le tírin tart do weisirig, niomad réideit. Fuig an á chapala. And it's committed go on a hash lumps or yere. Na hanni vi like a night chain. A vangia, a war, go seasadh de scíoch angan, idir méas gach alcas guisiart.
Caithfidh tú an leanbh a leagan síos.
Ní le cimar ama.
An leanbh bháilín. Cáhfuil dar chéile.
Hag mór le sean gefrí soichacht.
Megan na lan of boss all. Ní go dtí sin is féidir é a chur na caiiseáire.
Well, na maidin na mara, agus leawan dar fásta. Tór neart don leanna bhain mas, cosin é ergich agus fran ónach. Dusi é ónach cholú. Cemed é ó bhéla agus ó bhrón.
Chalínog, ní hí mai sé. Tá ben nefa a choníon go háidir bhar sléomh a gá lá seo. Ní féidir le hindaine eile cuidiú leata do bhrón.
Tá sé rád amhaid.
Ag se a bháin atá leagna atá weit.
Cén se go gaiir in lana. Marin manan mac díar san árice. An bríon seanmhail a dríachta de chracan na cara. Is tíhan de gach níos lech war a leis. Tá sé bh dhéine. Ní. Allone Mari. Allone Mari. Allone Mari.
Tá méid feitheamh leat le tamil a chalín. Ar feadh tamil bha. An méid sin blianta agus séasúir. Sí ar an talamhos mo chóir.
Lid a hall. Caihi mam lanú a chanja. Nílogam sa síl seo ac é.
Ná bí cuioine a chalín. Or tá mé an ann cuidiú leat.
Aperlo.
Caiig tú ghlach síalta a chrinniú suas. Síalta mostar de cahad bheith ann. Agus caiig tú iad a bhéirú chun té a dhéanamh díobh. Agus caiig tú an lecht seo thuirt an lenamh.
Níl a déanú a gomach a seo.
Ní féidir na síalta seo áil a cho cheach nar cheag bhí gríon ghubh na follingthe leis. An gríon ghubh a lisc de héal.
Agus is cinse goibh airlí seo a thuir ar ráistú ha?
Glag síalta dúirtí.
Sé. Bhain ghlacha ach.
Ach.
Is cuma. Díra ghlach síalta. Ach an te seo. Níor méidú é. Níor chaithn gréan dú na cáilína a scáidir.
Gan áras a Colleen. Tá mé bharsfach agus a bhana míon. Cén fa eile a bhíal am hyn mé.
Fíomhras a thógúim me leanamh.
Ma dheartháracha, cailí iad sa chuga, gá héasú róthain.
Is féidir leat ag seo thógáil, ach tá siad seo fásta milse, uair tá maithar agus móthar imithe. An graindú, a liscin gach saoil.
Scama. Tógi me na síalta seo.
Enjoy me that shwin frank large a hanig onsra man ye shoy. That if he at the rinje agus anyavi in a golu and a lama. Hanig me and smear and grafall and began. Agus na hefta, agus na eshki us alone. Anyavi, yani the kakinya. Hanig me yet ik thuis or nos na nyanga. Bhí mé lom hí faoi bhálach in éir, agus bhreithme pianta agus bró. Bhí mé faoi bhró agus ógla ara. Tháinig man gráinse, bhí seo go mór sin i círí os ma cheo. I gadrú dána agus dealrah agus tháinig mé an sofas, agus seo den na dolin. Deilioga agus eisce. Closure. Ag bhí mé mar a bhéir dealafá, agus muscad. Leis an óthairt, chnapanna, agus an taradas, agus an ólracht. Agus bhí mar sairthe ag muscadna, agus bhí smáil an faca aram. Or drí an grán all óir sin gan na bhleis, agus bhí mar sin fós an seáil ar an dollar. Agus bhí clianna in dhéarálum ag cogur trína deilioga. Gur ó fáilte cara ribhan leanúmanach. Or tan bheith agus an tasaín dispeite fúd le chéile a dúirtí. Agus mar sin ag an teartráirta ar fasa. Nach me se ó bhain atá ag fallint. Agus gur bheith an bhas bhain ar féidir leis an bheith Horch on beyond.
Hello.
Hello.
So, in many ways, you are the artist of lack.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Someone who, through your academic work and your artistic work, have explored notions of nothingness, contradiction, self-division. And you recently did a documentary called A Guide to Making Love. So let's start off with the title. Why is it called A Guide to Making Love?
I believe that was your idea.
Yes, that probably was, yeah.
So it's a guide insofar as it's not. It's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek title that claims to teach you something. And this is something that I do like about psychoanalysis and sort of confuses people sometimes. I remember getting into a bit of a debate with somebody years ago who was angry at the likes of Freud because he was saying that, oh, Freud is this patriarchal figure. You're lying down in front of the psychoanalyst in a powerless position, and the psychoanalyst tells you what to think and tells you what's wrong with you. This is completely wrong.
I know, absolutely.
But where it is right is that, and this is the dialectical truth, it's neither one thing nor the other, but one thing leads to another thing, is that it only really works, psychoanalysis, through the promise that it might help. You can't get to the point of understanding that it doesn't until you've really tried to fix yourself. This is echoed in lots of philosophers who say only a Christian can be an atheist. It's only when you really go all the way that you can come to understand that there's a nothing at the heart of everything.
Almost like if you go as far as you can into the search of meaning, you discover a kernel of meaninglessness at the very heart of that.
You could argue then that all of this sort of, through art, more conscious bringing to the surface of the fact that there's nothing, sort of almost telling people that there's nothing, isn't going to work. But it does work not only because film is not working really on consciousness, even though we as filmmakers might, take conscious positions relative to our work. First of all, as Hegel tells us, substance is subject. And art, what makes art is that it has a sort of consciousness in and of itself. And I think when people get frustrated by the kinds of ideological art we see now, sort of propagandistic art, that tells you what to think and tells you how to behave and sort of puts forward moral values and claims to have a moral rectitude within it that sort of justifies maybe wider exploitation in the economy that's taking place, but for corporations or whatever, it shows that they have the right points of view. We can feel that this isn't really art because you're trying to sort of put the cart before the horse in this situation. You can't predict what art is going to do to you.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, us consciously bringing to the surface or imbuing our art with lack as a conscious subject, a subject or notion, doesn't work because the film itself has more and will always have more. But also, as subjects, even if we know that there is lack at the heart of everything, we consciously forget.
Yes.
Julia Kristeva writes about this. She calls this the immanent transcendence of psychoanalysis, that the analysand and the analyst are constantly revolving around a remembering and a forgetting, This is the transference and counter-transference, and she calls this immanent transcendence here on earth. So, as Lacan says, God is unconscious. This sort of spiritual element to being human exists despite our best efforts to overcome it, and it's always there. And this is why when you are an analyst, you never get to the end of your own analysis. You constantly have your own supervision and your own analysis, because you, even though you might be the most right-thinking, absolute knowing in a Hegelian sense, it's never going to end. It can't end because of the nature. We are overwritten by something more than our conscious selves.
Yes. There's Todd McGowan talks about how at the conscious level we want wholeness and homeostasis and we want peace, but the unconscious logic is the desire for desire itself, for dissatisfaction. And there's a certain sense in which every time we look for a commodity that will promise some sort of satisfaction, it does give us something. in a disavowed way, what it gives us is dissatisfaction. And that's actually what we like. We actually like the fact that the product doesn't work, but we never realize that. So we're kind of duped, always looking for something that will satisfy, take away our lack, take away our despair. But there's a certain sense in which, at an unconscious level, those are things that inspire us. But we don't notice that. And your work, and this is what's interesting as an artist, is in a sense your work attempts to bring that knowledge to the surface, to present the viewer with the truth that what really unifies us and what's really going on is a type of dissatisfaction, a type of lack. Something that the gaze, basically the Lacanian gaze, is the idea that we can be confronted with this disavowed knowledge in some way.
Yes, so something that I'm really interested in terms of film is how it works as a collective medium. So not only, it's a medium beyond the makers, beyond the audience, beyond the cinema. As I said earlier, film is almost a subject divided in and of itself, and it feeds back to us something about the way we are and the way we live. So in some senses it's a medium that aspires to totality and to realism, and in doing so it potentially has the capacity to show us something about the nature of society in a material sense, a sort of attempted global sense. But it also, because of the way it's contingently developed over history, the star system, the Hollywood model exploiting desire, it tells us something about how we desire. And desire is really what makes us human. And desire comes from a point of division. It's not only generated by lack, but it is lacking, it can never be fulfilled. So this contingent history of cinema that uses this libidinal essence of humanity and feeds it back to us and tells us stories that are provocative and evocative and are to do with going after a goal. This is to do, I guess, with the fact that cinema developed at a contingent point in history related to American capitalism. And of course, we can criticize this conscious model of American capitalism in terms of desire. But what cinema can do is it can show us the lie of the promise. So whilst we consciously make films and we're told as filmmakers that we have to have a clear goal and a protagonist going after a goal, and audiences are potentially used to a subject achieving a goal, whether they achieve the goal or not, there's something that's fed back to us more than the intended message of the film on the part of the makers. So in a sense, like sex, the French call the orgasm the little death, because after you've had sex, you always have a death in your desire. You're suddenly shown how foolish and how impossible this desire is once you've reached climax. There's no there.
Yep.
And this is in a sense why sex is so traumatic. It's traumatic for various different reasons, and it can be if it's not wrapped up in fantasy.
Yep.
But if you watch a film and the goal is achieved, we might in a moment have a sense of relief or satisfaction, but as soon as we leave the cinema, there's a death in our desire. In another way, we can build ourselves up through the narrative, following this subject who goes after their desire. And then in the moment of relief, when they are shown the consequence of their desire, we can consciously show perhaps that all of this was for nothing. We can think of The Wizard of Oz. This is a very, clear version of this, where these characters go after a goal, and it's only in getting the goal that they realize that there's no wizard there. But they have learned through the process of the goal, through the transference of imagining that the wizard can fulfill them, they've managed to learn something about themselves.
Yes.
So it shows not only that, so this is not a point of view that's saying that desire is pointless or ridiculous or foolish. It's the strongest force in the universe and the most important force in the universe, and it's what makes us human. And even though there's a lack in desire, it's the process of going through and investing in something that makes life worth living.
Yeah. So in this documentary, The Guide to Making Love, you have 3 short films that are kind of interspersed throughout, and one of them is called Allone, that we're going to be showing, and I think it's a good example of some of the things that you're talking about. Can you tell us a little bit about even that title, first of all?
Hello. Well, this is your title. I remember when you first suggested it, the way I read it was like as if it was some kind of like Italian pasta, like Allone.
Allone, yes.
It was ridiculous. But actually, the idea here is the many different meanings that we can take from the word alone.
That we are all one.
We are all one in our aloneness. So Tom McGowan obviously talks about this a lot, that there is a universal. You know, a neoliberal society reminds us that we're all different. And of course we are all different. We're all born of lack, and this lack, this gap, inflects our subjectivity and means that it can explode into a potentially infinite form of subjectivity depending on our contingent experiences of childhood, our wider societal networks and things like that. So we are all different, we are all alone, but we are all alone in the fact that we have been given our subjectivity through the same fundamental lack in our subjectivity, the lack that generates our subjectivity, the lack in the society we're born into and our parents that they are marked with, and through that marking mark us.
Which kind of creates a social bond.
Which creates a social bond,
yes.
And the social bond would be impossible without that lack. Yeah. So we are all different. But in our difference, we are united, because the difference points to a fundamental lack. There would be no difference without the lack.
And without giving anything away, there's something about this short film that captures what you described about analysis, which is we go seeking to get rid of this lack, to get wholeness, to get completeness, to get an answer. And gradually through analysis, we come to encounter that lack and then find life within it. And in a way, that's the story of the protagonist in this, who is in a way seeking an end to their suffering, but somehow finds a way to endure that suffering.
She encounters the lack in the other. And the lack in the other is a reassurance. She's able to digest and accept, in a certain sense, the lack in herself and the lack in life, which is you know, manifest in death, the fact that it ends.
So we're bound together in our lack.
Yes,
very good.
Correct.
Okay. Well,
and in a time when we, you know, everything feels so divided and we are by design pitted against one another as a sort of unconscious distraction mechanism from what's really going on, how we are all united by material conditions, that this is potentially a philosophy that has a political outcome, in that as we resist, there's a sort of sense in which, as subjects, the closer we are to coming to the truth of our existence, which is profoundly traumatic when you think about it. There is no God other than a God that is divided. There is no reassurance. You will die. This is all there is. That's profoundly terrifying. And as atheistic as we claim to be, we still often believe, in fact, we all believe, it's the nature of being a subject to forget our lack.
Yeah. And atheism in itself is not negative enough,
no,
because the theist says God exists, the atheist says God does not exist. What you're saying is God is the inexistent thing. There is a lack that does not exist but insists, that in a way, if we turn our backs to it, destroys us and damns us. But if we somehow invite that into us, to commune with that, it can save us.
So today, as we are motivated to resist the contradiction that inevitably marks whatever social order we are in, and that if it is not consciously tarried with, will end in disaster and the collapse of that social order. There's some people who want that collapse to come and are quite happy to justify and endure the suffering that comes along with that. Hegel, who inspired some of the thinkers who are okay with that, wasn't so sure that we can know where we're going. So he says, the owl of Minerva flies at dusk. The insight comes too late. So we can't really be sure that justifying the suffering of this system will inevitably lead to something better. It may do, but we may have to take action, and we may have to realize that the suffering of people now is really all there is. And there's an urgency to that moment. So as we are motivated to recognize our difference as a commodity, to identify with not our lack, which is universal, but a form of loss, we imagine that there is a subject who doesn't suffer, and we suffer in our own way. And sometimes a subject marked by a commoditized loss is held up by the market as an example of how we can model ourselves, of having special knowledge. And whilst some people's experiences might give them an insight into the human condition in a certain way, everybody is also capable of that same insight because they are marked by lack. So I think this set of ideas is important at this moment when we are driven to not recognize the lack in each other. Capitalism, which is the mode of economic organization that we exist in at the moment, drives towards a collapse of the social bond. Everything that is sacred is profaned. There can be no social bond unless we recognize the lack in the other and the lack in ourselves. So the other sees us almost more than we see ourselves. In an age of social media and of isolation, we can sort of imagine that we are the only subjects and nobody understands us. But we do not exist outside of an existence also in the eyes of the other. And as we saw, film is something that's able to show us ourselves from the outside. And this sort of echoes the fact that there's billions of people who exist outside of us. We can connect with the desires of those on screen, recognizing that there's some similarity there, and that we can, whether we're watching a man or a woman or somebody of a different race or age, we can identify with them on a libidinal level, which shows that this libido coming from lack is something that unconsciously works through all of us. But there can be no society without knowing that we are connected. And as we're driven to isolate and see ourselves as different, this is in a sense a commoditization of subjectivity that goes against a universal, and it is very damaging to politics and to society. So we want to see that in the person who is of a different identity, it is precisely this difference that affirms a universal and that speaks to a possibility of building a collective.